hunt.
Now start.
Good morning. Thanks for joining us at our spring bug hunt. It's a beautiful day despite some snow on the ground, and I'm going to show you how we do a bug hunt. Get into the water, which is a little tough here. I didn't show you my D-frame net. This is what I'm going to use to try to catch some of those river critters. And they live in this fast-moving water, so you really got to knock them off. Some overhanging vegetation. Scoop up under these roots. Around this tree here. Current's a little strong today. You can see me out here. This is what's called a riffle, fast moving water over shallow rocks, and you want to get the things that live in the riffle, and so you need to do the riffle dance. So you take your net, set it down downstream, and then dig those toes in. Move up this riffle. Put this in a tray up here. Over there. My assistant here will help me. Put a little water in this tray. Too much water. Okay. If I see anybody there yet? Not yet. Sometimes it takes a bit of picking. So can I hand that up to you, and I'm going to come on out of the water? Yay, I didn't fall in. All right, let's take our bugs back to our sample back, and we'll start picking. We're gonna go this way. These invasive honeysuckle are kind of a problem, as is this garlic mustard. So, we didn't want to keep you too long today, so actually my husband Paul here, my film guy, and I have been picking bugs out of these trays for quite a while. Oh, look, there's a caddisfly. I don't know if you can see it right there. He's right there in the tray. Little caddisfly. It's a larva that'll turn into a fly in the spring. And it's fairly sensitive. So, when we do a bug hunt, we look for all the critters in the river, and we fill out a form that looks like this, where we put down some basic information about the site. We take the water temperature. It was 8 degrees Celsius. We fill out some information about water depth and silt and things like that, and then we check off all the habitats. I actually was in there for half an hour before we started and sampled quite a bit longer than I just showed you. Sampled for about half an hour. And then on the back side of this form is all the information about the critters. And they're put in different categories based on how sensitive they are to pollution. So I'm going to start with a category 1, and these are things like stoneflies and mayflies, things that need really high levels of dissolved oxygen. And if we find those, the score that we come out with will be higher. Whereas if we just find lower category things like the midge larva and pouch snails, things like that, the score will be a little bit lower. We'd like to find a little bit of everything, especially the sensitive ones. So let's start right over here, and I'm not sure if you'll be able to see this from the camera, but that is really exciting. Those are 3 mayflies, and I'm really happy to have them here today at this site. They have those 3 long tails, and I'm not sure if you're able to see it or not, but they also have abdominal gills. So, well, they're swimming around quite a bit. But if they sit still, whoops, there he is. You can kind of see that below his last pair of legs, kind of along the abdomen, there's gills that move around a bit, and that's how they keep the water flowing through, and that's how they get their oxygen. So looking here, I have 3 mayflies, and on my form, I'm going to put the letter R for mayfly, meaning they're rare, and rare means we have 1 to 10. And I'll also put down that we had 3. That's our mayfly. And I don't have anything else in that top category, so I'll move down to category 2. In category 2, we actually have damselfly larvae. So if you look at these rather large, let me get this little snail out of here, rather large bugs, they can't maybe tell so much on this one. Let's look over at one of these smaller ones. Just like the mayfly, they also have 3 tails. Sometimes they break off. The tails are a little more paddle-shaped. And damselflies are related to dragonflies, and you're probably more familiar with the adult form when they hatch out into the flying things that look a little bit like dragonflies, but they hold their wings closer to their body. So it looks like we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So we're going to say rare for damselfly larvae nymphs. And then right over here we have something called a caddisfly. Caddisflies are really neat because they're related to silkworms, and they actually will spin kind of a net. And some of them use this net to glue materials together to make a tube that they live in. The net spinners don't really do that. They just make that net and they stretch it across a rock and they filter out food. So the net spinner caddisflies, I've got 1 more over here, so we'll go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So again, that's rare for net spinner caddisfly. If we had the ones that were the case makers, they're actually more sensitive, and that would give us a better score. This just looks like a little root, not an animal. Moving on, this guy is kind of spinning around like crazy. We call that a scud. And we have 1 scud. You didn't find any more, did you?
No.
And I think the very last thing we have is if you go right over here, we have a whole bunch of these midge larvae. They're the larva of something that's a little bit like a mosquito, but it's got a fuzzy proboscis and it doesn't sting, and you oftentimes walk into clouds of them in the spring when they're doing their towers to attract each other. So looks like Paul, I had him count 10. Once he got over 10, we're calling that common. So common for midge larva, and that's actually in the tolerant category. You might have noticed something else here in the tray. These are clams. They're live clams, but unfortunately I will not count them because they are not native. These are called Asian clams. They're fairly small. They have these rings, very apparent ridges on them. They came here from Asia, and they're not helping with our native species. So we won't count them. We also found a few snail shells and things. We only count those if they're actually alive. We did find this shell right here, and this is from one of our native mussels. So these are extremely rare in the watershed. We used to have a lot more. This is evidence we had them at the site at one point, but just a shell.
What kind of mussel is that?
It's a native mussel. I'm thinking it might be a heel splitter clam. You call them clams, mussels. They're actually mussels. The heel splitter has a real sharp tooth, like you can see right there. They call it a heel splitter because if you imagine putting your heel down on it, you might split it right open. So, going back to my form, now I am going to add up all these different categories. So in category 1, I have 1 R, and the R's are multiplied by 5, so we have 5. Category 2, we have 3 R's, so 3 R's, and category 2 doesn't get as high of a score because they're not as sensitive. So we have 9, a total 3 times 3, total of 9. And then down at the bottom, we had the midge larva, and that was actually common. That only gives us a 1. So 9, 10, our score is 15. And I'm going to put it down here. We don't have any decimals there, but you round it off to the nearest whole number. And then if you go down here, you can see that's actually a poor score. I also have on here, I can check off Asian clams. So that's not a very good score for this site. This site is pretty far down on the Middle Branch. We have some pretty good quality sites along the Middle Branch, but they all tend to be a little bit, upstream of Newburgh Lake. And the farther you get down, we're pretty close to Telegraph right here. So there's a lot of impact on the river with stormwater and different things. Not as good a habitat. That's all impacting that. So that's actually showing up in this data. So I just wanted to show you a couple other things. One is new this year. We started testing for salt in the water. So earlier Paul took a sample of the water and we stuck this little test kit in there. And we're doing this through the Isaac Walton League. It's part of the Winter Salt Watch. And basically you read this by looking at where it was orange, it turned darker, and then the white slowly moved up until it reached a point. So it looks like this is about 5.2. So if you go over on the scale, that's showing you 259 parts per, or milligrams per liter, parts per million of chloride ions in the water. So that's fairly high. We did this year, we had some readings that were way up above, like even above 7.8. So this is very concerning. You know, how is that salt getting into the water? Of course, it's still winter, and it actually snowed yesterday, and we're still putting salt on the roads. And we're very concerned about that salt's getting into the water, and that's probably having an impact on these bugs too. So the very last thing that we're going to do, and I'll do this after we get off, but we do have a specimen jar because we want to collect samples of all the bugs. I don't really like to kill the bugs. Actually, I'll do this now. I don't like to kill the bugs, but we do get a lot more information by preserving some of the specimens so that we can go back. And what I'm telling you, I know that's a mayfly, that's an order of insects, but by keeping a specimen, we can take it under a microscope and we can tell what genus, well, what family, what genus, you know, sometimes even what species, and that gives us a whole lot more information. So I think I'm going to wrap it up now, but thank you so much for participating, and I really hope that you can come out for our fall bug hunt. We had really hoped to do the spring bug hunt. We normally do this with many volunteers that go out in teams to sites all over the watershed, but we didn't want to violate the governor's order or put anybody in danger of you know, spreading the coronavirus, and so it's just me here today. So thanks for joining us.